A very intense day in Miami federal court where former CEO of MJ Capital and several other entities, Johanna Michely Garcia, learned her fate as far as how many years she would get for the Ponzi scheme that she led, along with her co-conspirator or partner in crime, Pavel Ruiz, where he was sentenced to 9 years and a couple months last year. And now, after pleading guilty in July, Joanna learned that she got 240 months or 20 years in federal prison with time served and 3 years supervised release. So she has been in prison for about 3 years. And you know how sentences work. Maybe they do 80%, on good behavior and everything else. So she's looking at, 16 years behind bars. I'm going to go through a couple of things, how I felt in the courtroom, what I noticed, what the defense and prosecution argued, how the judge sounded. It's really uh, my first time in a sentencing hearing. So I'm certainly not a lawyer, not trying to be one on TV either, but just trying to understand where the judge is coming from. Is really, as he made some really interesting comments and kind of grilled the prosecutor, the head prosecutor, and even the defense. So, if you aren't aware, MJ Capital was a business loan broker company in Pompano Beach, Florida. Started before 2020, but at that point, they decided once Pavel Ruiz came on board, Joanna Garcia and Pablo Ruiz decided a scheme to raise money from investors in Florida and all across the country to then lend out or advance uh, business owners with funding. So these were really called merchant cash advances, revenue based financing. If you're familiar, most of my audience is familiar with the space. So MCAs, they were going to fund, they used the money that they raised from investors to fund those. Except it turned into a Ponzi scheme pretty much right away. They would pay back a little bit at a time to some of the early investors, 1,000 a month, 1,000 a week, something to that extent. We had three victims in court today that gave really, really moving, powerful statements. The first one was absolutely heartbreaking. And they also had a number of different victim statements in the court documents that they submitted their letter so that it could be read by the judge. So, kind of going in order here, the initial part of the hearing today was to review any other objections and to state the case for the sentencing time from the defense's perspective and the prosecutors. So, after a number of different things that popped up, the prosecutors announced that they are seeking the maximum of 20 years. And for the one count of wire mail fraud that Joanna Garcia pleaded to in July, made a deal really in July to, and they dropped all the other counts. And the defense was arguing more along the lines of what Pavel Ruiz got, which was 9 years and a few months. And he got that, I think, last year, and their argument was they were on equal footing. That Pablo Ruiz had access to bank accounts. He raised $50 million. He would be able to transfer and everything to, Joanna Garcia money if he needed to. And he handled some of the checks that were sent out. He recruited people to say these salespeople who were illegally essentially selling investments. And then the prosecutor says, well, no, that's not true. She's really the head honcho. She's the linchpin of organizing everything, handling the bank accounts, the checks. She also, once they were busted by the SEC and the FBI, which the FBI obtained millions of dollars in cash from their offices, she went back out, started different entities called New Beginning and some others to raise more money, to basically continue the Ponzi scheme, just under different entities hiding behind friends or family members who would use their name for legal reasons. And then she would run everything. That's what the prosecution alleged. And that's actually what she pleaded guilty to. So the defense was, like, hey, she admits all this stuff. She pleaded guilty. She's not innocent. She committed these acts, but the sentencing they were looking for is about 10 years. Then came the victim statements from the prosecutors. There's three of them. The first woman, she has had a family. She had two kids, she said, and she put $30,000, basically almost everything she had in savings, into this. And she, as a Hispanic woman herself, trusted the Mother Teresa, as they refer to Johanna Garcia as, in her world, to do the right thing with her money. And almost immediately, within a couple of months, I think it was, she wasn't getting the money back or getting the returns. The monthly return, they were stipend they were supposed to get, essentially, and she did not. And so this left her world in shambles. She said she was forced to live with, I believe, his relatives. She could barely put food on the table for her family. She was crying. She was in tears. She was pleading for the judge to get her back her 30 grand. Um, Really, really, like unreal, the amount of pain that Joanna Garcia caused to this woman and her family, not being able to feed her kids, like really eating off of, probably having to borrow money from people, things that she didn't say in court, but I'm assuming that's what has to happen. If you're in that spot where you gave all your life savings to someone and it's all gone, you can do nothing. And now the receivership has recovered about $30 million, most of it, 26 million of which is from a lawsuit from Wells Fargo, which there was a civil suit that said, essentially sued Wells Fargo, saying they were culpable in some fashion of this fraud. They let it go on, or they knew about certain things that shouldn't have been. So Wells Fargo has settled for 26 million, and then whatever else they were able to recover. But over 190 million dollars was attributed to this fraud, to this Ponzi scheme. In court today was something notable, that they agreed upon an actual loss. Now, in legal terms, there's a lot behind that definition, but they agreed that 86 million is the actual loss. So between the forensic accountants and everyone else from the FBI and so forth doing their research, this is what the number they've come up to, and that the defense proposed, and that they all agreed to. So now the receivership is essentially saying they've recovered almost a third of that 86 million. None of it has been paid out yet. At what point they'll pay out, we don't know. It's certainly going to be down the line. So this woman is not getting her 30 grand back anytime soon. So she'll be struggling until she can get, if she gets anything back, right? So the next gentleman went up there. He couldn't read his prepared statement because they don't let you bring your phones in, which he had his statement on his phone. So he kind of winged it. And he said he gave 50K, I think 10K at first, and then he put in more. And because he was getting some money back, but he had a nonprofit that saved animals that were essentially going to be put down because there was no homes for them. So he had this nonprofit that was his loss from all of this. He was not able to function, to have that continuing operation, and he had to basically stop all of that of what he was doing for his nonprofit. And then third victim was a gentleman that had, it was a GC. He gave her 20K at first, had a wife, two kids. As he was making this decision to give her money, MJ Capital and whoever else they dealt with, including Joanna, they decided 20,000 at first, where his wife wasn't going to be working anymore. I think she had some health issues. So the wife's not working, two kids, he gave $20,000, and then he gives another 80,000. And then it was all gone within, another month or two, as far as he wasn't getting repaid for that. So those three victim statements were just three in person, but there was a number of them submitted to court records, of which I've downloaded them and I have them here. I'm not going to go through them now, but if you would like to see them, send me an email, or you can go into the court records and public court records. So as you kind of feel that energy in the court. Now it's all building. The judge, this is where it gets to, all right, the defense makes the argument for the recommended sentence that they think, and they bring up Pavel Ruiz. And so the prosecution has to respond. And the defense, again, they say Pablo Ruiz was somewhere in the same realm as far as his responsibility for this, and he got 9 years and a couple months. So this is what we're asking for her. And the judge, after hearing the prosecution's argument, as to, they were saying, no, she's way bigger. She, initially started this herself, got Pavel on board, but then she was still handling it most of everything. And then when she got busted, she continued to do it, not Pavel, even though she did do some cooperation. She had some recordings of her and Pavel talking that got him in trouble. The judge wasn't having it. And again, he was a Hispanic judge. He says this in court. An 83-year-old Judge Jose Martinez says that, after hearing all this and hearing this case, he's like, I'm sick of being referred to as or thought of as some crook from Miami. He understands that he kept on saying, Miami's a fraud capital of the world. And he has, a Hispanic woman is the guilty party here, and even her partner who pled guilty, and he's Hispanic, and he was just saying this does not look good. You could tell his tone of voice, and then he was getting really upset and let the prosecutors know that he doesn't even know why he didn't have both cases or why the previous judge, I think was Judge Smith, who had Pavel Ruiz's case, why they didn't give the case to that judge because they're both, and the cases are related and that the same judge should have that. And even though it sounds like he's complaining to the government, or he was complaining to the government or asking them the question, I don't know how much control the government has in that, and didn't sound like from what the prosecutor said that he has any, and he didn't request any. And this prosecutor, the head prosecutor was Ruiz, was only on this case for about a year. Uh, so I could tell right as he was saying some things, I was like, all right, this is going on the heavy side, right? Because he said, well, because I didn't have that previous case, excuse me, I can't be held responsible for whatever I'm going to do in this case. Essentially, the disparity of 11 years, 9 years, and the maximum sentence in this case is 20 years. So then he gives Johanna Michely Garcia an opportunity to make a statement, and she does apologize. She apologizes basically to everyone, her family, her kids, her friends, all the victims, every investor. She apologizes. She said shed some tears. She sounded, I would say, genuine, but I think, it's tough to tell how anyone really feels. I couldn't really see her face from the vantage point. I'm, sitting way to the further to the left side on the prosecutor side. And the courtroom was pretty full. I went to the guilty plea hearing and there was 5 or 6 people. This hearing had probably 30, 40 people, both on both sides, the prosecutors and Ms. Garcia's side. So, I don't know if it's genuine or not. I don't know if she really feels remorse. Maybe she does. She's had, 3 years to think about it in prison. She doesn't look like the woman in the pictures that I post online. She's not blonde hair. She's brown hair and just in a ponytail and a brown jumpsuit, legs shackled, walking in the courtroom and walking out. And so once she's done with her statement, it was within seconds that Judge Martinez made his statement or made the decision, and he just really just says it. I mean, almost, he's just done it so many times. Not I don't want to say nonchalantly, but there's no emphasis. There's no like speech. There is on behalf of whatever, and I sentence this person to 240 months in prison and continues to go on about all the formalities and so forth. And you knew it got silent. I felt it get silent. I heard it get silent right before he starts talking. You could sense the tension in the air, but there was hardly a murmur once he said that. And maybe it's because how he said that. And there was no, I'm sentencing you this because of, there was just going through all the formalities. 3 years supervised release, time served, 20 years, and that was the max. That's the max. That's what the prosecutors asked for. That's what they got. He's really sending a message. He doesn't want people doing this. He doesn't want anyone to even think about doing this. Certainly, there's an appeal that's likely from the defense for the sentencing. So expect that. I think they have 2 weeks to appeal or file that they will appeal. But they did not really make a motion. Johanna Garcia did not make a motion or movements or react in any way that I saw from my vantage point again. Defense counsel, same thing. Prosecutor, same thing. So once that was done, it was, okay, she's really going away for 20 years for running a Ponzi scheme, bilking thousands of investors for essentially over, close to 190 million. The actual loss, however they calculate that figure, is almost unimportant at this point because of the vast amount of pain that she inflicted on these victims. And so I think the point here is, and why I write about this case and why I'm doing this video and covering this case, is I think, I mean, one, there's so many frauds out there of all different sorts when it comes close to our industry as far as alternative business financing, commercial financing, fintech. I put it out there, I cover it and write about it because I think it's that deterrence. You want people to not do this. A lot of stuff goes on that's not necessarily criminal, but just bad business practices and really shady behavior. But when it comes to this level, it's not even a question. Everyone needs to know. Everyone should know, so they can keep an eye on it, be aware of it if they were on the investor side, and spread the message to others. It's not, this type of fraud doesn't happen every day, but there are massive ones out there. You got to be alert. And, with that, I would just say, um, you know, keep an eye out, help each other, as you go through this business, or if you're, just a business owner looking out, uh, seeking financing, you got to know what's what. And then do your background on the companies as an investor, as a business owner, as everyone. So with that, I appreciate you guys watching. And if you have any questions, drop a comment, and we'll see you on the next video.